Hello everyone, this is Professor Reimer. This video is for my world history class on Thursday, January 14th and Friday, January 15th. It's entitled Unit 5, DOL 3, The Renaissance. In this lesson, we will explain the impact of the Renaissance by creating an acrostic poem. But before we get into any of that, let's do a preview as always. Have you ever heard the term Renaissance man or Renaissance person? What do you think it means? Pause the video, set up your notes, and answer this question. Oh, no, I made it easy for you. You don't have to set up your notes. I've included a note-taking guide with this video in the Google Classroom assignment. So open that up, print it out, and then do this preview. All right. Hope you paused it. I hope you maybe had heard the term Renaissance man. It's someone who's interested in a lot of different subjects, someone who's got a lot of ability in many different areas. It gets its name from this period of time, the Renaissance, which means in Italian or French, I can't remember, rebirth. Remember, in this unit, beginning of the modern period, we're looking at this bridge from the Middle Ages, the medieval period, to our world today. The Renaissance serves as one of these key bridges in world history. So let's get to it. All right. So it is a European phenomenon and almost primarily an Italian phenomenon. It does move northward as the map shows. It does spread into the Holy Roman Empire and into France, into the Netherlands. But it has its roots in 14th century Italy. All right. So as I said, a rebirth. It's a rebirth in the classics. Remember that classical period of Greece and Rome. It takes place in a time of increased trade, especially with the Ottomans, which we studied earlier in this unit. And it's going to profoundly affect learning, education. All right. Also, it's going to lead to new ideas, especially in art, a little bit in government, but a lot in human potential, right? It's going to shift this this worldview away from a religious-centered worldview, away from the church, and away from seeking to gain everlasting life in the beyond, to humans and what they can do with their lives here on Earth. All right, and like I said, it is one of the markers of the modern era because it's going to shift that thinking away from something distinctly medieval to something modern. All right, so we're going to look at 4 key areas of what changed from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. So it's going back in time, a little bit of review, because we're looking at what in history we call change in continuity, right? So change, what is different, but also continuous, what has not changed, what has stayed the same. So remember, in the Middle Ages, life is very local, right? It's on the manor, right? The land is owned by the Lord. The church is powerful, and people made what they needed, right? If they needed horseshoes, they made it in the blacksmith, right? If they needed bread, they made it in the oven, right? If they needed some vegetables, they grew it in the garden. If they needed flour, they ground it in the mill, right? There wasn't much trading going on in Europe in the Middle Ages, okay? That is going to change thanks in large part to the Crusades. Remember, these are these expeditions into the Holy Land, the Eastern Mediterranean, seeking to regain that territory for Christendom, right, to take it away from the Muslims. One of the major effects on Europe is that these Crusaders are going to come back with a new taste for luxury goods from Asia, right? And in the intervening or the subsequent centuries, Italian merchants are going to act as the middlemen, the traders that are going to buy those goods in what becomes the Ottoman Empire, and then export them, bring them to Western Europe, right? So as a result, these Italian cities, we're talking about Venice, we're talking about Milan, we're talking about Genoa, Florence, all right? They are going to become incredibly wealthy as a result, right? And as I said, yeah, the most important was Florence, where wealth from trade, right? And this is a key context of the Renaissance, right? It's this wealth from trade that is going to fund the Renaissance, right? Additionally, right, it's going to include a new class. Remember, in the Middle Ages, there's three primary classes. Going back to that image of the manor, right? You have the lords and the church officials are the dominant classes, and then almost everybody else, are these peasants, right? In these Italian city-states, bankers and merchants and skilled craftsmen are going to gain a lot of power as a result of this trade. And one family in particular are called the Medici, right? Who got their start as wealthy bankers, and then they use that wealth. They're one of these individuals who take the wealth from their trade, and they are going to patronize artists. They're going to fund the work of artists, turning Florence into Italy's one of Italy's most artistic cities. All right, now let's turn to government. So remember, government was very local, right? And it was based on this idea of feudalism or reciprocal relationships vis-a-vis your position, right? So if you're, let's say, a noble, right, you own most of the land, you were in charge of protecting the people on the land, and in return, they offered you their loyalty and their labor, right? If you're a peasant, you're offering that labor in exchange for the protection of the Lord, right? That is what government was primarily like in the Middle Ages. In the Renaissance, and certainly the period afterward, governments are going to become much more centralized, and the king is going to become much more powerful. And how are they able to do this? They're able to improve their ability to tax, right? And use that money to build armies that could force those nobles to obey. Because in the Middle Ages, it's the nobles really that have the most power. They're the ones taxing, they're the ones raising their armies with those knights, right? Beginning with the Renaissance and certainly afterwards, kings are going to be able to do that much, much better, right? We've studied this, but it's just a bit of a review. The 100 Years' War is going to speed this process up, right? As kings vis-a-vis the lords become much more powerful, as people became more loyal to their king, they are serving him in battle, and they're fighting far away from their lords and their manors. All right. Also, new military weapons are going to decrease the power of these feudal lords and knights. We're talking about gunpowder, which is going to dramatically change siege warfare, right? If you have cannons fueled by this gunpowder, you're going to be able to penetrate castles a lot easier. So the lords, who are masters of these castles, are not going to be as strong. Furthermore, knights, who are the most fearsome warriors of the Middle Ages, are no match for the longbow, which can shoot accurately up to 300 yards. So a simple peasant, skilled in the use of this longbow, is going to be more powerful than a knight. All right. Remember, we're talking about change and continuity. We've been talking about changes. There's also changes in religion. Okay, remember, in the Middle Ages, it's such a religious-centric world, right? Your duty as a person on this earth was to serve God, right? Obey the church, do the sacraments so that your soul could go to heaven. The church was not that concerned about this world when it came to its people. It was about devotion to the church, devotion to God, and preparing your soul for the afterlife, right? That is going to continue in many, many places. But in some places, that religious-centric view is going to be replaced with a more individual-centric view, right? The idea that this world is, if not as important, maybe more important than this future world, and that humans have a responsibility and ability to change their lives, improve their lives in this world, and not just focus on the world after. Okay. Also, thanks in part to the Renaissance, but other changes going on as well, right? The Crusades. The Pope and the Roman Catholic Church in the West are going to lose some of its influence, right? And that's going to really come into play a factor when we talk about the Reformation next time. But it has its roots here in the Crusades. Okay, yet it still is an amazingly important part of people's lives, and in the Renaissance, it's going to continue to play a role. The Pope is going to remain important, so it is both a change as well as a continuity. Right? It was still important. The Church was still important before this time period of the Renaissance. It's going to stay important, though a little less. All right, last, and I've been mentioning this throughout the PowerPoint, but human potential is really a big change that's going to happen during the Renaissance. What was expected, I talked about this already. Obey the Lord, obey the church official, save your soul so that it can live for in eternity in heaven. That was what was expected. You weren't expected to change your profession. You weren't expected to like climb the social ladder, right? If you were born a peasant like these individuals, you were going to be a peasant all your life. You're going to die a peasant. Your children are going to be peasants. That is just what you did. Now in the Renaissance, you're going to see people take a much more put more focused attention on improving the whole person, right? The mind, the body, right? Through largely education, right? Like I said, in the Middle Ages, didn't have land, very few options. You remained loyal to the Lord. You did your work on the manor. Now, because of this rising trade, this wealth, people are gonna have some options, right? To move to a city like Florence, right? And find a different kind of job, maybe as a merchant, but perhaps as a skilled artisan. Maybe you find, an apprenticeship in a weaver guild or in a metalworking guild, and perhaps improve your standard of living in your own life. Okay, people have more options, so that this idea that people can accomplish anything in this life really starts to take hold. And I know this is really a modern idea that you can be anything you want, but it wasn't always that way in human history. There was a time when that wasn't really the idea. That wasn't really possible. But in the Renaissance, this emphasis on fulfilling human potential takes root. All right, and individuals became the center of attention, less so God and the soul. Okay, and your social status, remember, during the medieval period, based purely on birthright. Now more and more on wealth and ability. And we call this new thinking humanism, right? Because it focused on the humanities, these classical ideas from Greece and Rome, right? Where you would study what we call the liberal arts today, right? Literature, music, physical education, rhetoric. If it sounds like I'm describing, school curriculum, I am, because it's based on these humanist ideas of putting the individual as the center of attention and improving the whole individual, mind, body, spirit, so that the world could become a better place. The individual could fulfill his or her potential. Now, him more so than women, right? It's primarily a male-centric idea, though women should have the same qualities, but stay more in the domestic sphere, in the home, and not so much in civic life. All right, I'm out of time for this video. As a closure activity, I want you to complete this visual metaphor, right? So you have here this plant, right, that we've labeled the Renaissance. So look at the word bank and decide what were the roots of the Renaissance. Okay, that's 2 and 3. What enabled the Renaissance to grow, like the water and the seeds from our lesson? What helped the Renaissance to grow, and what flowered as a result of the Renaissance? Pause the video now and then come back and check your answers. All right, here you go. The Renaissance plant, this flower, this metaphor we're describing, it has its roots in the classical medieval period. It's being fueled by this growth in trade and the growth of the city-states, and it blossoms into new ideas of learning and art. Check out the next video when we talk about some specific art of the Renaissance and I get to the process and activity. See you then.